мужская вариация.
Ask anyone to name a dancer. The chances are that they will say Rudolf Nureyev. Since his first appearance in the West in 1961, hailed as the most exciting dancer of his time, he has dominated the dance scene. This enchanting Italian island, once owned by the Russian dancer Massin, is one of his 7 homes around the world. He seldom remains in any of them for more than a few days. His commitment to his profession is absolute. His fiery Tartar temperament leads to recurrent clashes with authority and is part of the Nureyev legend. With the charisma of a pop superstar known to a vast public, he has given more performances a year and been seen by more audiences worldwide than any other dancer. So great is his urge to dance. Nureyev's parents were Muslim Tartars from Ufa in the remote Republic of Bashkir, which is at the foot of the Ural Mountains, midway between Moscow and Siberia. They were workers in the field, they were peasants, and for them the revolution meant liberation. His father, Hamid, joined the army as a political instructor. Rudolf, the longed-for son, was born in 1938.
I was born on a train on Trans-Siberian Railroad. My father was on service, military service in Manchuria. And so he called my mother and 3 of the children to come over to join him. And as you know, the trip is very long. It's about 12 days to cross from Moscow to Vladivostok. So I was shaken out of the womb by the Lake Baikal.
When Russia entered the war, his mother and 3 sisters returned to their hometown of Ufa.
Ufa was a very small city. There were not much sound. There was no, very seldom cars would be passing on the streets. And the most haunting sound of the city was sound of the train. You could hear it for miles away, calling you, beckoning to go somewhere. I used to stay for hours on a mountain of Salavat, watching those trains come and go across the river. into distance and going all the way to Moscow and Leningrad, and then I presume to Hungary and Paris and London and whatnot. In my mind, I traveled with those trains. In the middle of night, you could wake up hearing wheels tapping the time of the distance.
The story goes that Hamid was away when his third daughter was born. Fearful to disappoint, his mother Farida wrote that he had a son. When Rudolf was born, the war kept father and son apart. He was 8 when Hamid returned home to the room they shared with 2 other families.
It was one room.
Yeah.
It was just one room, 12 square meters, 3 by 4. And no utilities whatsoever. To go to the toilet, you had to go to the street, and in a severe winter, to be kind of ventilated by hurricane or snowstorm.
The Nureyevs always had to live with a constant struggle to make ends meet.
Well, we would gather bottles, wash them and sell them back to the shop and things like that, or gather copper, sell old newspapers. I used to sell old newspapers. During war, when father used to send sometimes chocolate, she would make a cacao, we called it, and sell it in the market. I used to sell water in a hot summer day.
The market is still there, and still has plenty for those who can afford it. Lack of money meant that the Nureyev's life was harsh. Rudolf's prevailing memory of childhood is of gnawing hunger. His dreams of super wealth was never to go hungry.
Once, it was just before the end of the war, we really had nothing to eat. And she probably gathered some piece of fabric or maybe a shirt of my father, went to the village and sold it to my aunt. And then she came back with some goose and some flour. And she was attacked by wolves. It was about 6 o'clock in the evening. So she took her blanket and set it on fire and scared them. So, ballsy lady.
On New Year's Day, 1943, Farida smuggled the 5-year-old Rudolf into the local theatre. It changed his life.
I went to the theatre to see a ballet. Then and there I decided that I'm going to be a dancer. To begin with, before even overture began, a curtain, it was a green velvet curtain, different colors, projectors, the red and green and blues, were throwing light on that curtain. And I thought that already was magic. And then suddenly overture began and curtain opened, and there's a big kind of void and those wonderful people on it. I thought, well, that's me.
But reality was the humiliation of his first day at school.
I mean, I didn't have any shoes. I was carried on the back. My mother carried me on her back to kindergarten, and I had my sister's clothes.
At school, he joined the folk dancing class. At home, Rudolf never stopped singing and dancing. His father, a battle-scarred hero of the war, viewed Rudolf with alarm.
He beat me up each time he catch me. But I just went on. And, but of course, my mother was an ally, and somehow it balanced.
Ну, все-таки мать есть мать, она вообще к детям относится, по-моему, кажется.
I think mothers usually treat their children better than fathers do. Our mother was very gentle, but our father had a very stern character.
He came from the war and he wanted to find Paul in his son, who goes hunting and shooting and fishing. And I find it all very uncomfortable. And he left me once when I was first hunting excursion. He left me alone in a forest. It was the first outing together. He insists to go hunting. And since he didn't want me to go behind him and carrying all the time gear, so he parked me inside of a rucksack and left me there. And it was my first time in a forest, and suddenly I saw a woodpecker who scared me. And ducks flying in and out. So after about 1 hour, I didn't have the courage anymore and started to go, blah, 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 blah. So he came back later and laughed about it. My mother never could forgive him this incident. Then when I went to school, they heard that I was gifted for dance. Whatever performances, I was dragged into those performances, amateur dancing. Applauded and tormented at the same time for it.
Нет.
Nope. He didn't get on with the other children.
Он был немножко задиристый.
He was rather cocky.
Откровенно скажу, не
To be
нравилось то,
honest,
что у него...
they resented the fact that he had talents which they didn't possess.
Какими другие учащиеся не обладали.
There was always a lot of friction. They used to pick fights with him and he would retaliate. I had to act as peacemaker between them all.
Он очень упорно, устойчиво шел к своей цели. Очень.
He was stubborn and determined and pursued his goals. One day, his father came to see me and said, I don't want my son to become a dancer. After school, I want him to receive some kind of technical training. For example, I would like him to become an engineer so that he can stand firmly on his own 2 feet. Please influence him. I didn't. Anyway, it would have been futile. He was determined, and he achieved everything. He was very stubborn.
Настойчивый в этом отношении.
Rudolf defied his father and continued with folk dancing, improving all the time.
Usually folk dancing is a fiery dance. It's a temperament is very important, and command of stage. So from early years, I knew how to be on stage and how to command it and how to shine.
When Rudolf was 11, he was discovered by Anna Udeltsova. She was once a member of Diaghilev's Ballet Russe. Anna married an officer of the Tsar's army, and they were banished to Ufa. She's now 101.
Я жила в Уфе и занималась там самодеятельностью.
In 1948, I was living in Ufa, and I ran an amateur dance group for children. There were many of them, but Rudolf caught my attention. He was just a little Tartar boy, an urchin, shabby, untamed, but he impressed me with his love of dancing. And, moreover, it struck me that he had a perfect ear for music. He did his preparation class wonderfully. He stood out from everyone else. It was very difficult for him to get on with his dancing because his father pursued him. His father lived in hope that his son would become either an engineer or a doctor, certainly not a dancer. He believed that it was scandalous for men to dance. After a year, he had learned all I could teach him, so I sent him to my friend who had been a dancer with the Mariinsky Theatre. I guided his future training, and my husband helped him a great deal with the social graces. I said to Rudolf, you must try to get into a professional academy so that you can go to the Kirov.
Чтобы тебя приняли в училище, чтобы у тебя был диплом.
I wanted to go to Leningrad school, and I had to gather some 3,000 rubles, so I went to some artel with the cobblers, and I taught them twice a week dancing the way I began myself.
He saved enough money from dance teaching to buy a single ticket to Leningrad.
My sister said, oh, there's only one train, and that train you should take. So I arrived to Moscow. To arrive to Moscow, it's about 3 days by train. But you have a sleeper, stuff like that, normal. Then I had to wait all day long at the station where the suitcase standing there like this, waiting for that dreadful train. And then I boarded that train, which took 16 hours to go to Leningrad.
He first saw Leningrad in the early light of an August morning in 1955. He went straight to the Kirov Theatre. The name Kirov implies a standard of classical perfection. This is the entrance to the school, and it was from here that Pavlova, Nijinsky, Krasavina, and Balanchine all set forth.
Все шло на танец, понимаете? И не надо спинкой работать, не надо. Попробуем-ка еще раз, давайте повторим. Давайте.
At 17, Nureyev, the untrained provincial boy, was placed with much younger students in their early teens. He shared their dormitory, their strict routine. Even the Kirov school was run on strict party lines.
Под вас. И, два. Ну, прыжок. О, сейчас хорошо прыгнул.
The students were forbidden to go out in the evening, and within the first 2 weeks, there were difficulties between Rudolf and Shelkov, the director.
Держать поясницу. И, раз. Лопаточки. Выверни ножку через пятую. Два. Сейчас соберем глаза. Раз. Выверни коленочку. 3. И смело. Раз. И, два. Прыжок. Ну ничего, здесь хотелось побольше, немножко поздно.
It was the director of the school, Shilkov, who took me at the very beginning to his class. And then, me seeing that he is not a great teacher, I was trying to get out of his class as soon as possible. And that was very daring. But I went to see Ivanovsky, who was artistic director of the school, saying to him that if I stay in this class, army will come in the middle and take me away. It's better I move to class of Pushkin. So that's what they did. And of course, the director never forgave me that. And at any given moment, he needled me.
Perhaps the greatest influence in Nureyev's life was Alexander Pushkin, a man capable of adapting his teaching without inhibiting personality or talent.
He was an excellent classical dancer himself, probably not very attractive, but he was one of the purest dancers. Well, he made combinations very danceable. They're kind of irresistible, they're very, very tasty, very delicious. You had such a joy of executing those steps in that combination. And he had this ability, the most danceable class. So your level went high and high and high, but you had to persist yourself. He would not tell you, do it that way or that way, correct a little bit, but he wasn't methodical. But it is his combinations which provoked you into dancing. He associated with music and emotion. Particular step, gesture, have to be filled with such feelings. It can be just a blank, cold configuration. And there was a joy of dancing, but also you felt like you doing part of the performance each time. But I can't say that it is only he who influenced my outlook on dancing. Dudinskaya, who was the prima ballerina of company, she gave me the idea of classicism. Musicality, attack, sense of suspension, time suspended. It was a beautiful performance. I loved her performing Baedeker and Don Quixote and Raimonda. Nobody could do Raimonda better than her.
Я обратила внимание на Рудика, когда он был еще в средних классах. Не совсем маленький, но в средних классах.
I first noticed him when he was in the Kirov school. He must have been about 16. But there was already an instinctive sense of style and form. It emanated from within him. So where did he get this sense of beauty, this sense of music? He had no background, coming as he did from Ufa. What was most amazing was that by the time he had finished school, he was an accomplished and rounded dancer.
И вот действительно так и получилось. Когда он заканчивал школу, это был уже совершенно законченный танцовщик.
Nureyev's independent spirit continued to cause conflict. He did exactly as he pleased, flouting a...
And I remember once my first year, I went into theater to see Swan Lake or something. When I came back to where we lodged, the door was locked. They made me bang the door for a very long time. Then they let me in, and they said, we punished you, that you went to the theater. And they took my mattress away. And next morning, they didn't give me my breakfast and lunch. So I went to my friends and had the breakfast there. When I came back and teacher asked me why you were not at this lesson and that lesson, they say, yesterday I went to the theater and it displeased director of internat very much. So they punished me. They made me sit on a windowsill all night long because I went to see the theater, and they took my provision. So I guess next time if I made a mistake like that, they will whip me. So director went up through the wall, and they had really such a horrendous meeting where they were trying to eschew the words. They take words out of my tongue, I mean, out of my memory, so I didn't say that. That didn't happen. It was brainwashing, was most ferocious. I was sure they were about to throw me out of school.
It's difficult to imagine how, in 3 years, Nureyev surpassed all the others.
И вот он стал танцевать на нашей сцене.
I understood that this was no ordinary boy, and I recognized all of his qualities. So I decided to take the risk of inviting him to be my partner in the Ballet Laurentia, his first principal role. It gives me great pleasure to remember dancing in Laurentia with Rudolf Nureyev. For this I gave away a piece of my heart. You can't dance it indifferently. This photograph of us here has finally received permission to be hung in the museum. I'm really pleased about that. I have a lot of these photos.
Он не только танцовщик, он актер. Not only dancer. He is a very great actor.
During the next 3 years, he emerged as the most brilliant dancer of his generation. But his independent attitudes continued to concern the authorities. They were suspicious of him. They simply didn't trust him.
Well, they worried that I might leave, and they, when I went to Vienna, they interrogated my mother and everybody, and trying to get assurances that I will not stay. I didn't have that on my mind, not then.
The first time I saw Rudolf Nureyev was in Vienna. He was there with the Kirov ballet, and I was there with my company doing Cyrano de Bergerac. So after the performance, I saw a young Cossack, a young little boy like this, and very enthusiastic. It was the first time he was seeing a ballet from the West, contemporary ballet, classical contemporary ballet. And he had already I felt in that boy the strength and the will to explode, what he did a short time after.
In May 1961, the Kirov visited Paris on the first part of a tour that would continue to London. Nureyev was only included at the last minute on the insistence of the French impresario. While the rest of the company went on supervised coach tours, he, the free spirit, went his own way, making friends with the French dancers and enjoying all that Paris had to offer. He was always shadowed by 2 KGB policemen. His dancing caused a sensation, and Parisians took him to their hearts.
И когда мы поехали в Париж,
when he danced Sleeping Beauty in Paris, he stunned the audience. He was such a colossal success that they were overwhelmed. He was a showstopper.
была в восторге.
The first time I saw Rudolf dance was in Paris with the Kirov, the week before he was coming to London, the company were coming to London. And it was the most extraordinary experience because we didn't even know who the young man was who was dancing the role of the prince, because he'd been such a success the evenings before in Paris that the director had decided to put him on instead of the man who was in the program. But the moment he walked onto the stage, he took command completely of the stage and of his audience. He was almost arrogant as a prince, but he wasn't acting the prince, he really was the prince. And his partnering was beautiful, so elegant, so in harmony with his ballerina. And altogether, when he started his solos, one realized that here was a very exceptional talent. And we came back to London telling everybody, wait until this young man comes. And of course he didn't.
Today, the main airport at Le Bourget is closed down, but in 1961, it was the major airport for Paris. On June the 17th, it became the center of a drama that made world headlines.
When we came to the airport, suddenly they said, you don't have place on that plane. I thought that was extraordinary. And a man who had enormous success brought enormous success to Kirov Ballet, have no place on that plane. They could have taken somebody else. But to say, Then somebody said, Khrushchev wants to see you dance at Kremlin. Oh, who with? What costumes? Oh, you'll find there. So I decided right there and then that I'm not going back. That's goodbye time.
It's not so simple. Even defection has its disciplines, its etiquette. The French authorities were sympathetic.
So I've been told you have to walk very slowly, 6 steps exactly, and to say, I would like to stay in your country. And that's exactly what I have done. Just before that, I was hiding behind a cone, and for some strange reason, all Russians, KGB, they all ran onto the street, past me. The moment they ran past, I went directly to those 2 commissars. And no jumping, no running, no screaming, no hysteria. Quietly I say, I would like to stay in your country. They send me upstairs and say, well, you have to wait there 45 minutes before you sign paper. So I went upstairs and they gave me paper to read. It was in French. I guess there was a translator, a Russian woman, and she typed away and then gave to me. Suddenly she turned on me and she said, you are a fool, what are you going to do here? You're going to be hungry, you're going to be without work. I said, you shut up, you bitch. She started, trying to work me out of France. There's a bangs in the door, some Soviet guys that will come, I will take care of you, we'll go back to Russia. There was a nurse screaming that I was mad, I have to be calmed down, give an injection. Don't let anybody out.
La décision de Nureyev a-t-elle une signification politique, sentimentale, voire même tout simplement artistique? On ne sait.
We only found out about Rudolf's defection when the other dancers returned and he wasn't with them. Then we guessed he wouldn't return. No one ever told us what had happened.
He did the right thing. The right thing.
For me, it was a terrible blow. His father rejected him, a political instructor from the Red Army, and suddenly his son decides to defect.
The KGB hounded him. There were death threats and constant phone calls from his family to come home.
They called me, and I was amazed that my mother would find me in Deauville. What does she know about Deauville? And when mother said, your country, your mama, your papa, this, I say, Mother, you forgot to ask me one question. She couldn't hear. I said, well, ask me that question. So what is the question? Are you happy here? So, are you happy there? I said, yes.
He promptly joined the Marquis de Cueva Ballet. On the 2nd of June, the day he was due to make his London debut with the Kirov Ballet, he was in Paris, dancing the Sleeping Beauty. This fragment of a home movie was taken at one of the rehearsals.
Kuivas offered me a contract for 6 years, and I said, it's too long. 6 months is too long. 3 months, I accept only 3 months, because I was determined to go to Balanchine and also to go and study in Denmark with the teachers of Erik Brun, whom I consider the best dancer there was in existence. And so I thought, first thing first, whether friend or enemy, I had to go and find out what makes him tick and how it makes him tick and learn the ticking. So I went there and I studied for quite a while, and I saw all his performances.
This collaboration with Erik Brun was the start of a lasting friendship. It was while in Denmark he received a phone call that was to change the course of his life. It was an invitation from Margot Fontaine to dance in London.
I was in London helping to organize a charity matinee, and we had invited him to appear in the performance, so he came over to London to discuss it. And from the airport he came straight to our house. It was about tea time, and there he was on the doorstep. I went down to meet him, and the first thing I thought was that he looked pale and pinched. Somehow I wasn't expecting that. Anyway, he came in and sat down to tea. My co-organizer was with me. And we started talking. I would say we were sort of eyeing each other a little bit, perhaps trying to size each other up. Something or other happened and he laughed. And I said, oh, my goodness, you laugh. What a relief. And immediately I felt, well, this is going to be all right. And even at that moment, because he then had very, very little English. He hadn't, it was the very first time he'd come to England. And even at that meeting, I started to notice this intelligence that he had. And very soon afterwards, there was a press conference for this performance. And he was doing a television interview. I thought, well, I'd better go and look and see if he needs any help. Well, he answered 1 or 2 questions, and I thought to myself, that boy doesn't need any help at all. He just knows exactly what he wants to say. And even with his very limited English, he always managed to just hit the nail on the head and make his points. So I said, well, there's something special here.
Actually, I'm a romantic kind of dancer, but I would like to dance modern things and to try every different way which exists. I can't change my style. It's me. I dance what I think, how and how I feel. Maybe by some influence I just will develop something else, but I'm not going to change nothing.
It is a fact that his entry into the West was like a bomb dropped into the ballet world, because here we had a dancer of tremendous virtuosity who was also a marvelous artist. And that combination we were not used to. They were very rather strictly divided in the past. So it was a great event in our lives to have him.
The first evening when Margot and Rudolf did Giselle together was a magical evening that I think nobody who ever saw it would forget. The emotion from the two of them came over in waves to the audience, and the wonderful way that they blended together with their technique, their acting, their feeling for each other. It seemed to be as if they'd been made to dance together.
In 1962, I was a student at the Royal Ballet School, and I remember one morning seeing Rudolf for the first time working with the Royal Ballet Company. And I was watching the class through the window of the door, and my first impressions of Rudolf was his incredible physical ability and the care that he was taking over his classwork. He influenced male dancing in England, probably the West, more than any other dancer has ever done, through his vitality on stage, through his technical precision, through his electrical stage presence, and through his artistry. And that is something that I and my generation really benefited from and try to use in our performances.
He had great musicality, which of course is a very practical and wonderful thing for a great artist to have. He's frightfully intelligent. I mean, he would wrap himself up in a role, not as Mr. Nureyev dancing. And this is quite unusual very often in very great stars. Every role gets turned into the person. But this is not the case with him. He was a marvelous interpretive artist of any choreography that was offered to him, and wonderfully respectful and dedicated in his real modesty when it came to understand the creation of a role, what it meant, what he had to do, not just what he wanted to do.
As a dancer, his great qualities are one of amazing technical ability. His corsair, I think, has been unsurpassed. As an artist, his stage presence is something that I always admired enormously. He only had to walk onto the stage and immediately everybody's attention was drawn to his entrance. And the commitment he had to everything that he did, whether it be a romantic ballet, a bravura piece, a dramatic role, he could change amazingly. All of he seems to change his personality to adapt to all of those different styles, but still bringing the Nureyev stamp to everything he did.
And it is also probably completely forgotten that so far as the big classical ballets went, he wrought a great change. They were considered the ballerinas' ballets, and the prince had a sort of a role there, but it was subsidiary. Rudolf didn't like that. He thought that the prince had to be as important as the ballerina, and he saw to it that he was.
Margot Fontaine and Rudolf Nureyev. Their partnership became a legend. Nureyev had found a firm friend he could trust, and he felt secure in her company. Margot Fontaine was generous, friendly, and cheerful. They danced all over the world, superstars, bringing ballet to a new audience.
So we were feeding off each other, reading each other's mind. Of course, there were a lot of rehearsing to do, and different ballets at different degrees. They were easy or difficult to rehearse. Like Margot considered herself inferior in Giselle to anybody else, so she took every possible advice, whatever I could give her. In Swan Lake, she was more firm, and we had a difficult time.
In 1964, choreographer Frederick Ashton and designer Cecil Beaton created a ballet for them, Marguerite and Armand.
It was like 4 people possessed. We improvised, we had a very good time. And then I would ask, does anybody remember what we did? So nobody remembered, and I was getting frustrated and angry. And Margot is ready, and she's so fluid and easy she improvises. But I want to know what we are going to do on stage. So I think that was the only drawback. Finally, I tried to take piece by piece, and we fixed the pas de deux. And then came on in a state you saw it on performance.
This was the first time a new ballet had been created for Nureyev. It is the story of the Lady of the Camellias. This is the meeting of Marguerite and Armand. Nureyev was, by now, a much photographed international celebrity. The press and the public were entranced by this handsome, rags-to-riches wonder boy. Every minor event was blown up by the publicity power of his personality. But he simply wanted to be judged as a dancer.
A lot of publicity, it did upset me. In Russia, you don't have that kind of, this amount of publicity. And of course, there's a lot of stories were not always correctly reported. And that made me very upset. And I tried to keep away press, refusing interviews, refusing to talk to them. And so I earned very quickly a label of being very difficult and unpleasant and all that. I just didn't want to have so much written about me. Also, my great preoccupation was I wanted to be part of the Royal Ballet, part of the company. And I thought with so much publicity, I will not feel equal with them and they will not feel comfortable with me.
The swinging 60s, the decade of youth, the Kennedys, the Beatles, and Rudolf Nureyev with the status of a pop star. He brought dance to the people. The chance to develop his creative energies and establish a further career as a choreographer was provided in 1964, when there was a break with the Royal Ballet.
They eased me out of the theater and said, well, now go and take a stroll. We'll see you in autumn, or we'll see you in January, or we'll see you in April, or something like that. So I would have big gaps without work, without any security, not knowing where to go. So I started to mount productions in the other big theaters, like Vienna. In Vienna, I mounted Swan Lake. Then I mounted Don Quixote, then Sleeping Beauty at La Scala, then Nutcracker in Stockholm, then Don Quixote again in Zurich. And all that gave me work when I was eased out of Covent Garden.
The Prince's solo at the end of Act 1 of Nureyev's version of Swan Lake.
I loved his reproduction of Casse-Noisette. How much of it he'd lifted straight from the Kirov, I don't know. He always said it was a Russian production, but I found it infinitely more exciting than anything I've seen for years. I loved it.
Nureyev averaged, and still does, between 150 and 200 performances a year. Choreographic productions are an extra. Horizons were always there to be broadened, and modern dance was to be the next target. This exceptional young man had experienced the excitements and frustrations, the inspiration and the vanity of mastering classical ballet, which had been for him the escape from the sour, hard life of his childhood in Russia. But even in Russia, his great wish had been to work with the New York City Ballet and its artistic director, George Balanchine.
Well, I consider that Balanchine is the greatest choreographer, and you can't mention this century without his name. You can meet many choreographers of great importance, but you can't meet him. I went to New York. I had some television galas. He came to see performance, and I asked him, can I join his company? He said, well, my ballets are very dry. I do not have Giselles, I don't have any romantic ballets, I don't have those great pas de deux. Go away, dance, get rid of your princess, and come back.
In order to perform Balanchine's ballets, he had to return to Europe. "16 years later, Balanchine and Nureyev finally worked together.
Very interesting way of working Balanchine had. He would say, sit there and say, ask pianist to play a particular piece. He said, what is the tempo? What is the tempo? And man plays, said, let me check. So he goes to his room and listens to the record and get kind of tempo of that piece. He comes and gives the tempo to pianist. So pianist plays in that tempo and they fix the rhythm. So then he says, what is the climax, the last climax? Can you play last climax? So pianist plays tsam tsam. Ah, what is this tsam tsam? So he then starts working with us, making pose or something, pirouettes, tsam tsam tsam. Ah, good. Then he says, what is the previous climax? Tam tam. So he said, what is this? Tam tam. Then he choreographs something else, another position on the floor, coming down. Then what is one before? So he goes through all those climaxes, backwards. And then he says, well, now we can choreograph the dance. So we go from beginning, and he weaves and choreographs the dance around those Himalayan tops. So he knows in advance how the piece is going to finish and what climaxes were going to be before and after. I found that wonderful and master and witty. So I was very lucky that he shared that with me.
The choreographer, Glenn Tetley, was the first to combine classical and modern dance. His ballet, Piero Lunaire, provided a favorite role for Nureyev. Here, Piero, in his tower, plays with the moonbeams.
I also found in Paul Taylor great inventions, new steps, new composition, apart from other structural beauties and ideas, just plain steps, contortions, absolutely unexpected.
In 1972, Nureyev made his debut as a film director in Melbourne with the Australian Ballet, directing his own production of what they call in the world of ballet, donkey shot. He was director, choreographer, he was a dancer. He was in his element, master of the complete creative process. In 1976, Nureyev made his first appearance as a film actor. He also danced with a new partner. In 1982, Nureyev became artistic director of the Paris Opera Ballet, a company renowned for its bureaucracy. He found himself in conflict with the establishment. Sylvie Guillaume was a member of the Corps de Ballet.
When Rudolf arrived in the company, he had the chance to find a young company with a lot of young people and with a lot of talent in it too. It was not only a corps de ballet, there were a lot of good solists. And Rudolf knew how to use them and to give them a chance very soon. Because in Paris Opera we used to have the chance, but much later in the career, because there is a huge hierarchy, what we call hierarchy. It's a lot of state inside in Paris Opera. So you have to climb slowly, years after years. And Rudolf didn't care of that. He just thinks that this dancer was good, young, but very good, and he wanted to give him a chance. Rudolf gave me, the first role he gave me was in his Don Quixote. It was La Reine des Dryades, a small part in the second act. And the first big ballet he gave me, it was Swan Lake. And he named me Étoile with Swan Lake. And after with Rudolf, I danced Giselle, I danced Swan Lake, I danced Don Quixote, and Cinderella too. A lot of things.
Nureyev's Cinderella is set in the Hollywood of the 30s. He plays the film producer.
When Rudolf took the direction of the Paris Opera just behind, he had difficulties. He had lots of success because he made big, beautiful productions, but he had difficulties because it's a very difficult place to run. I've been there too, and I know the situation. You know, in these big places, in these huge theaters with so big company, beautiful company, so big company, everybody is the director. When you sign a contract there, you have to sign with at least 4 people. So director artistic is one, director artistic say, I want you. Then you have the administration, they want you or they don't want you. The other one is the inspector of I don't know what, who doesn't like what you do because you don't make someone he protects to dance the ballet. So it's very difficult. And I said recently to the people who are the big boss of the place there, I said, you know, if you want someone to succeed, really, let him be the only one to sign. Let him take the responsibility, the full responsibility. So for Rudolf, it was difficult because he was doing these great ballets, classical, traditional, beautiful ballets in really very successful way. And then he was going on trip to dance in other countries, and then the sea had the tempest there. There it was the tempest. Everybody was starting to make problems and to make difficulties and to prepare problems for him when he was going to come back. And he didn't realize in what situation he was. And one day I told him, I said, you know, I don't know in all the other places, I really don't know, but here I know, and I tell you, you are seated between 2 chairs. So be very careful and prepare the answer to all the bad things. And one day he just left.
In 1987, Nureyev was allowed to return to Russia.
After he fled to the West, he was denounced here as a traitor and then ignored while his fame spread round the world. But now the Soviet attitude towards exiles is mellowing, and Nureyev himself, on his way to a first reunion with his elderly mother, was not trying to make political points.
I'm happy to be here. I'm happy that I will go and see my mother.
How is she?
And my sisters. Well, she's not very well. And that's as much as I can say.
Were you surprised to be given a visa to come here after all these years?
Well, not really. Not really. I think humane spirit should win eventually.
Do you think it's thanks to Mr. Gorbachev you're here?
Very possibly, but I don't know.
2 years later, he was invited to dance at the Kirov Theatre after an absence of 28 years. As his success in the Western world had not been reported in the Soviet Union, few people in the audience had ever heard his name. Here in the Kirov Museum, there are displays commemorating their great dancers: Pavlova, Nijinsky, Karsavina, and now Nureyev.
I was waiting for him here near the door, and he came in his very original costume, and he was emotional. It was quite clean, and but it was very difficult to speak with him and to ask him something. Only he was all time with me. I remember it very well because he needed somebody to follow, somebody here in the school. And I came to him and I told him, now we'll go to the museum. And we went, but there was such a crowd of journalists and television from every country, really. He came immediately in the other room, he looked it, and then it was impossible to do something because he was crying, he had tears. And then he stopped so and he said, let's go, Father. And we went away.
We were all delighted to see him in Leningrad. It was a great joy. And we derived a great deal of delight from his dancing. He could always jump higher than anyone else and do more pirouettes than anyone else. But that wasn't the most important. What was so remarkable about him was the artistry of his dancing.
It's a great pity that we could not see him during so many years. But we are very happy that now the dancers, the great dancers who parted from here abroad, that they can come back. It's, you know, it's very important, and it's well. Some years ago we could not dream about it, and if it is realized now, we can be only happy.
И, очевидно, он очень боялся, что я его не приму.
He was worried that I wouldn't see him, so I decided that if the state had forgiven him or pardoned him, then I couldn't, as the French say, be more royal than the king himself.
То есть, по-русски сказать,
I received him. We kissed each other, we embraced, and I was delighted that all of my endeavors had not been in vain.
И я радовалась, что все-таки труды мои не пропали даром.
The two worlds of East and West are finally reconciled. Alone on his Italian island, the solitary rebel from Ufa takes stock.
I left Paris Opera. Gorlinsky, my manager for 29 years, died. Then I bought this island. So I want to figure out what I'm going to do. Am I going to be a man of leisure, or I still will keep hammering at my feet and being on stage non-stop? So it's results I will know probably by January, whether to stay on a farm or on an island is better than being in Paris or London or New York working or doing choreography or dancing or doing musical comedy. What is best? But I think dancing is the thing. It keeps me in good spirits, in good physical condition. I decided at the age of 49 to learn to play piano. Actually, when I was at the Paris Opera, and I thought, well, being director is not enough. I have to learn something else. I remember before going to the performance, I always had to put a record of Bach.
Nureyev's life has been deeply satisfying and sometimes bitterly frustrating. He's managed to cross that inexorable artistic gulf, and in so doing, he's brought the wonder of dance to audiences in every corner of the world. His singular commitment to dance has been absolute, taking precedence over everything and everyone. It may appear to the outside world that the price Nureyev has paid for perfection is loneliness. But for the pauper who became a prince, the enrichment of his spirit has come from leaning out and creating movements of great beauty and style.
If you look at all my houses I bought, they're always outside of the city. In London, it was absolutely outside in Richmond Park, where I was all by myself, alone. I buy a house above Monte Carlo. It's somewhere on top of the mountain. Again, the same in America, where I bought a farm. It is kind of very far and very much by yourself. Each time I try to go into society, it doesn't work. It's artificial. I would do it like a performance and then get out as fast as I can. I don't fit